And let me get organized here. As you're getting situated and ready to go, just to highlight and put us all in a setting of what has taken place, Paul made it to Jerusalem. A mob attacks him, and a chief captain comes and rescues him from the crowd. Paul asks permission to speak. He does. In the process, he states that he was called of God to leave the Jews and to reach the Gentiles. That upset them. They said, "Away with him." And chief captain rescues him again. And he's brought before the council, which is chapter 23, a group of people. And Paul begins to speak immediately without any formal introductions or anything. And in the process, he insults the the Sanhedrin, and didn't know he was doing it really, but the guy commands that it's slapped across the face. Paul calls him, "You whited wall." In other words, "You hypocrite." And then they say, "How dare you speak to him that way? He's the high priest." And Paul goes, "Oh, wait a minute, I didn't know. And so he kind of backtracks that way. At that moment, he's perceiving that there is a division in the group between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he says, "Guys, I'm just a Jew, but I'm a Pharisee." So that caused some division in the group there, and there was a great dissension, and then the chief captain fears that Paul's going to be torn apart. Literally, those are the words that are used there. And verse 10, and he rescues him once again. Now we get to verse 11. We are on letter B in our notes, the courage. The courage. Letter A was the counsel. Letter B is the courage. Look at verse 11. Acts chapter 23, verse 11. "And the night following, the Lord stood by him." So immediately in your notes, put the presence of the Lord. This is the fourth time in the book of Acts that we are told that Jesus appeared to the Apostle Paul. In Acts chapter 9, Acts chapter 18, Acts chapter 22, and now this one. So it's the fourth time. And if you want the references, I have those. But I'm glad that God knows when we need him. And here's the Lord showing up. So we see the presence of the Lord, but fill in the blank first, then we'll read the verse. Number 2, the promise of the Lord. Watch what the Lord promises the Apostle Paul. He says, "Be of good cheer, Paul." Now, to me, if you don't read the rest of it, it's kind of comical because he just was, they were beating him in the mob. Then the soldiers came and arrested him. Then he tried to give a defense, and then they yelled at him. Then he goes before the council. He gets slapped. And here the Lord is saying, "Be of good cheer." But nevertheless, the rest of it says, "Paul, for as thou hast testified me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome." Now, I think that's interesting. It's a wonderful promise of two things. One is he's going to survive this. Secondly, it's going to be the fulfillment of his desire. Do you remember a couple of chapters ago, he had 4 things in mind. He said, "I want to go up to Macedonia. I want to go," and he did. "I want to go down to Greece," and he did. And while he was in Greece for that couple of month period, that's when he wrote the book of Romans. And he told Rome, "Hey, I'm coming to you, but I need to go to Jerusalem." He starts to go to Jerusalem, but he finds out there's a plot against him, so he takes a land route and starts traveling back. He's now to Jerusalem, which is a third goal, and now he's being confirmed that he's going to his 4th goal, which is Rome. And so Paul, in the back of his mind, I'm guessing, is going, "Yeah, like I'm accomplishing this." That was his desire anyway. But the Lord tells him this and giving him courage during this. Letter C, the conspiracy. The conspiracy. Number 1, underneath that, the plot. Let's look at verse number 12. And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Now, a couple of things. I think that's interesting because here are Jews that believe in the Ten Commandments, one of them being, thou shalt not kill. But it was the Apostle Paul, before he was the apostle, that thought to kill and persecute Christians was a good thing. So the mentality was this is okay, but they had this idea of killing the Apostle Paul. The second thing is, this is not a time-oriented vow, necessarily. It's a task-oriented vow. The task was, kill Paul. We won't eat or drink until that is done. Now, it is sort of time-oriented because you can only go a couple of days not eating and drinking. But certainly the task was at hand. That was their major focus. Let's kill Paul. Verse 13. And they were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priest and elders and said, we have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now, they don't mention the drink part. Later on, eating and drinking is both mentioned. But here they only mention we're not eating. That also is interesting to me, that not only have they all agreed for this task to kill Paul, but now they're admitting and publicly, somewhat publicly, to the spiritual leaders, we're getting ready to kill somebody. So they're announcing this to these priests and elders. Verse 15, now therefore ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though ye would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. I just think this is one of the most interesting stories in the book of Acts. It's not the most interesting in my opinion, but it is one of the most interesting because these 40 plus assassins they have the idea that killing Paul is a good idea. They're admitting it to the spiritual priests and elders, and then they're plotting to deceive, saying, hey, let's pretend, tell the chief captain, lie to him, that we've got to do further questioning. And in the process of transporting the prisoner, we'll kill him at that time. Wink, wink, thumbs up. I'm sure God's behind us. You know, this warped righteousness is just so fascinating to me. But not only do we see the plot, but we see the providence. Now the story gets more interesting because there comes along an eyewitness or ear witness, as I should say. Well, anytime you start getting 40 people together to try to keep a secret, it's going to be a little hard. So these guys are talking amongst themselves, and I'm sure out loud in the hallways and such, and it is overheard. Coincidentally, it's overheard by a relative of Paul. Acts chapter 23, look at verse number 16. And when Paul's sister's son, now that means it's his nephew. Now we're not told anything about Paul's sister, what her name was, whether she was a believer, whether she was a churchgoer. I mean, I tried to look at historical documents. There was some conflicts of what they believed about her. But nevertheless, the focus isn't her anyway. It's just on her son, which is Paul's nephew. But he heard of their lying in wait. He went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Now, the indication here is that he did not tell his mom, and he did not tell anybody else. I don't know that for certain, but it just seems like once he hears this, he immediately goes to tell his uncle. Whether he tells his mom or not, I don't know. But I would think there would be some urgency in this guy's mind to go tell Paul. But nevertheless, he tells Paul, look at verse 17. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him. Remember, centurion is a soldier over 100 soldiers. And said, bring this young man unto the chief captain. Now stop there. The word young is a very generic term. The word young man can mean a boy, it can mean a teenager, or it can mean a young adult. I personally think, even though I read in multiple books that he was a teenager or young adult, I personally think he was a boy. I'll tell you why in just a second. It doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. It's just my opinion, and it's not a doctrine, so you could disagree with me, but it's just my opinion that he was younger. But he says, bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. Now remember, the chief captain is the guy that's supposedly going to be talked into bringing Paul to the council. And en route, these guys are going to be lying wait. So the chief captain, who has rescued Paul several times before, is now going to be told this. Now, I don't want to jump the gun, but watch this. Verse 18. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul, the prisoner, called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. So it's kind of a relay. The young man, the nephew, hears some information, tells Paul. Paul tells the centurion brings the young man to the chief captain. And so it's kind of a relay bringing this young man to now the chief captain, which tells us a principle. You take problems to the people that can do something about it. You don't just sit there and blab your mouth about every little problem that you know to anybody and everybody. You tell the people who need to know. This young boy didn't go say, hey, I want to post this, and go tell my kids, my friends, all this stuff. He immediately told Paul. Paul told the centurion, because he was the guy that to get the access to the chief captain. And now the chief captain, the guy that's going to make the decision, has the information. Where'd I end? Verse 18? Prayed me to bring this man. Okay, verse 19. Then the chief captain took him by the hand. That's the phrase why I think the boy is a boy. I just can't imagine the chief captain grabbing a teenage boy's hand or a young man's hand. I just can't imagine it, even in that historical context back then. So, but nevertheless, then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, what is this that thou hast to tell me? So now the chief captain is getting the information that he needs to, and the boy, the young man who's being led over there, now gets the information. Now, watch what he says to him. Watch what the chief captain, what the boy says to him, and then he says back to the boy. And he said, the Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire something of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they may neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. In other words, everything hinges on you, chief captain. What you do with this information is on you. I'm just relaying it, which, by the way, gives us another application when problems come. If once I take my problem to the person in charge, I need to leave it in his hands. What he does, that's right, I'm scot-free. I've done my job, let him do his. I don't need to go around to the next employee, my fellow neighbor, the next church member, and tell my problems over and over again. tell it to the person in charge, and leave it there. What a concept. Verse 22, so the chief captain then let the young man depart, and watch this, and charged him, see thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. Now again, I don't know if he went home to his mom and told his mom or anything, but certainly it would seem to indicate that the boy did as the chief captain prompted him. But nevertheless, nobody else finds about it as far as we know. So it seems to be that way. So we see the plot, we see the providence. Then number 3, the protection. Now the chief captain, once again, is coming to the rescue of the Apostle Paul. He has the information, he has the authority to do something about it, and his job is not to take sides politically or anything. I admire this guy. His job, he's doing his role, he's doing his function, to keep peace, to keep harm, and he's doing it with everything. In fact, he's going to use resources at his disposal. Letter A, the soldiers. I want you to see the number of soldiers that he gathers together to escort one man. Now, it's not because they're afraid of Paul. They're afraid of what others might do to him. All they know of is at least 40 conspirators, but there may be more, because a young man was telling this information. So he's preparing for the worst. Look at verse 23. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea. By the way, Caesarea is, I have it in my notes, 60 miles away. So that's quite the distance. It's just not next door. And horsemen 70, that's 60, and 10, so 70 horsemen, and spearmen 200. Now, what I find most interesting in all of that is the last phrase, at the 3rd hour of the night. Now, the Roman guards and soldiers had 4 watches or shifts that they would do. They would do three-hour shifts. They would do it by 12 hours, so from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. 9 p.m., that's first watch. From 9 p.m. to 12 p.m., second watch. 12 p.m. to 3 a.m., third watch. And 3 a.m. to 6, the fourth watch. And then you'd go first, second, third, fourth. The only way to tell the difference, are you on the second watch or the third watch, is to say the night or the morning. So if you're on the second watch in the morning, that's one time, but if you're on the second watch in the evening, it's another time. It's 12 hours apart. So here it says the 3rd hour of the night. So 6 p.m., add 3, you're at 9 p.m. Now, that's important for 2 reasons. One, you would want to, if you're going to escort a prisoner away, you'd want to do it during the night, not during the day. During the day would be a giveaway. That's kind of obvious. Secondly, which I think is so clever, it's during shift change. There would be a change of soldiers anyway, of coming and going. So to have all of these soldiers here, some people might see suspicious, but it's shift time anyway. And so I think it's very clever for him to choose 9 o'clock. He didn't say 10 o'clock. He didn't say 11. He didn't say 8 o'clock. He said 9 o'clock, the 3rd hour. And so I just think that's super clever of this guy. I hold this guy in quite a bit of respect, even though I think he's an unbeliever, but he's got some character to him. So we see the soldiers, and then verse 24, watch this, and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. Now, if they're going to Caesarea and they're bringing him to Felix, therefore Felix is in Caesarea, 60 miles away, and he is the governor, the guy that's in charge over that area, over Judea. And so he's going to judge this issue. The chief captain knows this area is no longer safe, even with the religious people. Carl and I, right before the church service, were talking about how in the name of religion, a lot of crusades and murders and things have been done over the centuries, because all in the name of God, you know. And so here are this group of Pharisees and Sadducees, a group of other Jews that are plotting to kill Paul, and this chief captain, I don't know what he thinks of Christianity or any religion whatsoever, but he's doing his job getting Paul out of Dodge. So soldiers, then letter B, the salutation. Now, he is going to stay behind, this chief captain, but he's going to write a letter. And that letter is so comical to me. It's so smart, but it's comical. Now, all right, do you remember last week when they were getting ready to bring Paul in, the chief captain? He didn't have any answers because he asked the mob what's going on, and nobody gave him a straight answer. So he was going to take Paul in to scourge him. Do you remember that? And then Paul said, wait a minute, I'm a Roman. And they go, oh, we weren't even supposed to bound him or bind him. Well, in this letter that this chief captain is going to be writing, Felix, the governor, he writes a very eloquent, informative letter, but he leaves out certain details that would do him harm. He forgets to leave out the part that he bound Paul. And so it's just interesting to me, all this. So watch the letter that he writes, and he's formal. We find out his name here. Look at verse 25. I'm going to read quite a bit of verses here. And he wrote a letter after this manner. Claudius Lysias, that's the chief captain's name, unto the most excellent governor, Felix, sendeth greeting. Do you see the formality of it, as well as the giving honor to his position? This man, referring to Paul, was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army. See how he's kind of lifting himself up, choosing words very carefully. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. Now, that's sort of the truth, but not quite. He didn't find out he was a Roman until a little bit later. But nevertheless, and when it sounds like a teenager telling mom and dad stories, you know, they tell certain story, pieces of information, and leave out certain others. But anyway, verse 28, and when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth into their council, which is exactly what he did, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. So he says, I think it was a religious issue that they're getting upset about, but I don't find anything legally an issue here. Verse 30, and when it was told me how that the Jews laid wait for the man, I sent straightway to thee, and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. And then he ends the letter, farewell. So in this letter, evidently, he has now told the accusers, after Paul is sent away and given a head start with soldiers surrounding him, he has now told the accusers, hey, I sent Paul to Felix, you can appeal to him. I wash my hands of this mess. You guys are crazy. And so he sends this letter off to Felix. Verse number 31. Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. On the morrow, they left the horsemen to go with him and returned to the castle. So some soldiers took him, all of the soldiers took him a certain distance. Some returned and others continued to go with him. Who, when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle, the letter, to the governor, that's the one that Claudius Lysias, the chief captain, wrote, presented Paul also before him. So imagine the setting here before we read on. Felix is getting this letter. He's getting the Apostle Paul. The letter's there. The Apostle Paul's there. The soldiers are there. And supposedly the accusers are coming. Verse 34. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was. Now stop there. That's huge. Felix was the governor of Judea, and it's important to find out the jurisdiction, whether he has the rights to try him or not. If you're the sheriff of one town, you can't go arresting somebody in another state or what. You have to have jurisdiction. So he's asking this question, and keeping in mind, Paul is from somewhere else. He's from Cilicia, a different province altogether. But he asked of what province he was, and when they understood that he was of Cilicia, which, by the way, Cilicia, even though it's a different area, it was an imperial province, so had a lot of trade, commerce, dealings with Judea. So Felix is kind of going to oversee it. He says, I will hear thee, said he, when thine accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. So that's the end of chapter 23. But once again, Paul's locked up for doing nothing. Falsely accused, several different cases, slapped, mobbed, beaten, now taken to a different city, rescued from a killing, and now put in a different prison until the accusers are now going to come for a formal hearing before Felix. Chapter 24 is a courtroom setting that is so interesting, and I can't wait to get to it next week. We are going to end it there. I am going to read letter C to you. I think you have a long paragraph there. Letter C is the situation. This just summarizes everything that we just did. The chief captain knew that he had an explosive situation and had to act fast. He had to get Paul to Caesarea into custody of the Roman governor Felix. The centurions are told to get ready 200 soldiers, several horsemen, 200 spearmen, 70 horsemen. They were going to leave at 9 p.m. The chief captain wrote a letter to the governor explaining the situation. When they arrived the next morning and Antipatris, the soldiers returned to Jerusalem, leaving the 70 horsemen to take Paul to Caesarea. Felix had Paul wait in prison until the accusers came. Paul was now in Caesarea, awaiting the arrival of the Sanhedrin council to try him before Felix. And now, just the last couple of chapters left, chapter 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. We've got 5 chapters left. We're going to conclude the life of Paul. I'm looking forward to the ending here. One of the most interesting stories, I think, of Paul is coming up in a couple of chapters, and we'll get to that. Any closing comments? Yep.
I missed what goes into B2.
The promise of the Lord. I didn't know if you were playing Battleship there or Scrabble or what. B2. B2. Any other things I missed?
Is this court thing in the next chapter going to be kind of like Perry Mason?
Is it going to be
like Perry Mason?
Perry Mason? It is actually. Yes, it is. They're going to bring
The prosecution's going to lose.
they're going to bring an orator. That's for certain. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for preserving the Apostle Paul, and you have a time for all of us. And certainly he'll die eventually, but not right now. You have a purpose for him. He's not done with his ministry. And that's true for all of us. Help us to keep serving you until our time is up. Thank you so much for life, and most importantly, for eternal life. Bless these faithful people, I pray, in Christ's name. Amen.